Stay away from people who always try to ruin the character that God is trying to build in you. Stay away from people who always try to find excuses not to do what God has called them to do. People who always try to give you reason and excuses not to do what God has called you to do. Stay away from such people. Stay away from people who always try to get you angry. People who always try to stir up anger within you. People who always try to stir up jealousy and envy. Stay away from such people. People who always try to get you pursue um, your own interests, or people who lead you in a direction contrary to what God has called you to do. People who always lead you into doing things that are contradicting the new mind and the new person that God has established in you. Because at the end of the day, it's going to cost you. Being the person who God has called you to be is going to cost you. It's going to cost you to walk away from certain people. It's going to cost you to uh, avoid doing certain things, and the reality is that most of the time we think we try to identify sin. We try to specifically identify sin, and the reality is that sin is not always visible to us, because sometimes we want to we take sin as just an act, or as action. But the reality is that sin can also be found in words that people speak, in thoughts, and in motives. So at the end of the day, if we always expect to identify sin in order to try and avoid it, then now we're gonna miss out. So the best thing to do is just to deny yourself, because that is what the scriptures are telling us. The scriptures telling us that the scripture doesn't say deny your sin. It says deny yourself, because you are the one who leads yourself into sin. Once you deny, now you once you deny yourself, now you have become the person who God has called you to be. You're going to be the person who God has called you to be. Only after denying yourself, you will be able to do the will of the Father and to be the person who God has called you to be. And the reality is that there are things that you do that, your actions has an impact on people. Sometimes you stop doing things because, they are contrary to what God has called you to do, and because, you stop doing certain things, now then people are no longer happy with you, because what you were doing had an impact on them, and they were in favor of that impact. They were feeding off that impact. But now that you stop doing it because you want to do the things of God, Now they're gonna be angry at you, they're gonna be mad at you, and they're gonna be trying to convince you to continue to do the things that God has not called you to do. And you gotta be careful not to do the things that men tell you to do instead of the things that God has called you to do. Because at the end of the day, because God has called you to do things, men are gonna convince you to do things which God has not intended you to do. Because God has called you to do specific things, and therefore you just gotta be careful, guys. We need to be careful, and we need to stay in prayer. Pray. We need to pray without ceasing. We need to pray without ceasing, because one thing that I've noticed is when you are in prayer, when you are prayerful, now it um it causes the enemy to back off you, because every time you pray, you tap into spirituality, you tap into your spiritual life, you tap into heaven, you tap into power, you tap into authority. Because when you pray, you declare you declare faith, you declare the victory that Christ has already given you. You declare your authority and the power over the enemy. And so it causes the enemy to back off. So pray without ceasing, guys, and surround yourself with people who are with the same interests as you are. In other words, with people who have the mind of Christ and are feeding off the mind of Christ, people who are feeding from the will of the Father.